Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to discuss the idea of what is a serious collector. I received this question a couple times in the phrasing of how do I become more serious in this hobby? How do I become a serious business? How do I become a serious collector, etc. I think discussing the idea of what a serious collector is to me will benefit you regardless if you're here to simply collect the cards or if you're here to try and make money as a business or if you don't even know why you're here. I think this video will better help you understand why it's important, in my opinion, to be a serious collector or to be engaged in the hobby. So for me in general, what a serious collector is someone who just has a genuine interest in the hobby. That sounds basic for a lot of people, that sounds generic, but there needs to be an emphasis placed on that idea of being engaged because the hobby has grown to a point where there's a lot of opportunists, flippers, and other people who are simply here to just ride the wave of monetary gain. So what I'm going to try to do is separate the difference between those people and proper businesses and proper collectors by isolating that core concept of being engaged in the hobby. So what I mean by being engaged in the hobby is very simple. It means that you just have a genuine interest or a genuine level of engagement in Pokemon or whatever hobby it is. It doesn't matter if it's just Pokemon. It could be any hobby you're in. So I've said this before in other videos, the more engaged you are, the higher the probability is the better off you'll be. I think that's a very basic logical sequence, and it couldn't be any more true for Pokemon, especially because it is a niche hobby. You can't just simply Google, hey, what is the current stock value for Charizard? Or what's the current X value for this set? That's not something that's attainable. That's something that you can only acquire through being engaged. So the value of being engaged in the hobby on a genuine level is universal for me in relation to business and collector. And in relation to the collecting side, being a serious collector, it's not about if you spend $100 in a day or $100 in a month or $100 in a year. It's not about how much you spend or how many cards you have. It's about what you do with what you have that defines who you are. And that's something I think a lot of people tend to forget because there is a lot of natural competition in the market, and that's okay. Competition's healthy. However, when it gets overly aggressive, people can start to, get deterred or develop insecurities. And at the end of the day, you don't want to let someone else's insecurities become your own. If someone is saying something crazy on social media, that's purely a reflection of them and where they are in life and their maturity level. So don't let that interfere with your collecting goals. Don't let that interfere with your prerogative. And going back again to that core concept, if you are someone who is genuinely interested in the hobby, that peripheral stuff won't really faze you. If you know why you're here and you know that you have a genuine interest in Charizard, Blastoise, whatever species it is, or the hobby as a whole, or a certain era, just focus on that. Just do your thing and focus on that. So being more specific about that, about being seriously engaged in the hobby, one of the other issues outside of, dealing with a lot of the drama or whatever you want to call it, a lot of the social aspect of a hobby, which is natural. It happens all the time. And sometimes this is a very passionate hobby and sometimes the passion comes out the wrong way. But another aspect is dealing with the hype of a certain card. So certain cards have a moment where they have a lot of hype behind them. Gold stars, shining cards, Asaki cards. There's certain cards that are usually staple items in the hobby, but they'll trend and they'll have a few months, year maybe, where they are discussed heavily. A lot of people are trying to get the PSA 10 versions. And what you see is a lot of very short-term competition that is driven mostly by people who aren't engaged. So earlier when I said I want to make a distinction between the two camps, the people who have a genuine interest, they typically aren't messing with that hype. And that doesn't mean the hype is necessarily bad or necessarily wrong. It's just that being patient and being able to seize the opportunity and capitalize is what you want to focus on. And you can only achieve that by, again, being engaged. So for example, someone like me, when I see a new hype going on, I remember when No Rarity started to have its hype, I remember years of people passing over No Rarity cards, not even noticing them, and then all of a sudden they had a hype to them. So the point is here is that if you're going to buy on that peak, make sure you're doing it because you have a genuine interest, because this is not going to be a good financial gain. Okay? And how you make that decision, again, goes back to the impression I always emphasize. When you have that genuine interest, when you are engaged, you develop experiences, and those experiences are refined over and over again, similar to, if you think of sports, like a memory muscle. So when I see a card, it's an immediate impression, like a memory muscle, because I've done this over and over and over and over again countless times that it's immediate reaction. I can size up that item and it's an impression. It gives me a very specific feel or vibe. So like, again, going back to 15th anniversary Pikachu, I got a very potent impression from that card right away. You know, like if you had to rate it, it was like a 9 out of 10, if you will, if you had to quantify it. So that's just a good example of what I mean by the people who are truly engaged from a business angle. That's a great example of how it displays itself or shows itself when you are trying to make a sound purchase. So again, going back to the hype issue, hype is not necessarily bad. There are cards that trend, cards that increase, and certain people want to have that card, and that's, you know, that's your goal. Just make sure you understand why you're buying that card during that hype. Make sure you understand why you're you know, in this hobby and why you're doing what you're doing. So again, if you are a serious collector, the best advice from me in my experience, I've seen every shape, size, and form of someone in this hobby. There's not a new pattern you're going to show me of an individual in this hobby. I've seen every shape and size. And the one thing I see too frequently, especially now because Pokemon's popular, are people who just get caught up in all the hype and all the noise and all the information that's out there, because let's face it, with social media, with internet, you can hear about things that you simply cannot afford. A good contrast, let's put it on myself, a good contrast would be, I simply cannot afford vintage baseball products. You know, like a T206 Honus Wagner, I just simply cannot buy that card. Or I simply wouldn't want to buy that card because I'd have nothing left if I tried to go after vintage sports cards. And that's okay. I don't think about that. It's not, you know, my core concept for who I am. Again, serious collector within the hobbies that I'm in. And I stay focused on that. So I never think about, you know, something like a Honus Wagner, or, you know, if you want to go even further, Picasso artwork or things like that have these very astronomical price tags. Never crosses my mind. So that's a good example, you know, for myself. It's like I never mess with that level of collecting because it's something that I can't hang with. So I don't mess with the noise and the atmosphere with it. And that's true for Pokemon. You got to maintain your budget in a literal sense and maintain your identity as a serious collector, and understand that it's okay if you don't have a trophy card or if you don't have the PSA 10 version of every set card. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's about what you do with what you have, not how much you have. So that's the focus here, or the takeaway from this video, which I think will help both, you know, serious collector and business have a more fruitful existence, or a healthy existence at least, is to maintain that core identity and make sure that you're reflective on, you know, why you are collecting, and pace yourself. Again, going back to those, when I said there's not a new pattern or new person that's going to surprise me, the thing I'm seeing too much are people who are overextending. A great example is a guy who messaged me. He got caught up. The itis got him. The collecting itis got him, and he couldn't calm down. And he was buying, and then he's at a point now where he's got to sell all this shit, and he's trying to like collect, you know, the older cards, or, you know, he's trying to synthesize or, you know, trim the fat, if you will. But the bottom line is he went way too far because he got caught up in all the noise online. There's every card is available now. You can search every single card. You can find pictures of it. You can find people on YouTube talking about their cards. There's just an infinite amount of knowledge out there and information that you can search. So therefore, you got to maintain your pace and your identity. So hopefully that makes sense for a lot of newer people in the hobby. I think the idea of a serious collector sounds intimidating for someone who doesn't spend a lot of money, but understand that my identity as a serious collector today is the same as it was 10 years ago. You know, when I was only collecting cards for my binder, that same core of a serious collector, in that I had the same genuine interest in the hobby back then that I do today, has not changed. And you got to protect that. You got to maintain that, because that's what's going to help you regardless of your avenue. If you're doing this, let's talk money. If you're the guy who's doing this strictly for business and money, if you have that core concept of having a genuine engagement, you're going to have the edge on the guy who doesn't, who has the same comparable, you know, capacity to spend, think, whatever it may be. Make it one-to-one. If you have that core identity, you'll be better off. You'll be able to make those nuanced purchases faster. You'll be able to pick up on the patterns quicker, understand things on a more specific and nuanced level. So with that said, being a serious collector is what you want to be, and don't let it intimidate you. Serious is inherently serious because it's literally serious, but it's not something that is some type of hierarchy in that someone who spends more money is therefore better. I value people on a merit-based level. There's plenty of people that I value on the same level that can spend $100 in a year that do the same person who spends $100 in a month. These people have different palettes and they offer different things, but if both have that core concept of being a serious collector, they're even in my eyes. And I think that's how most genuine serious collectors view other serious individuals in this hobby. So your seriousness, again, should be measured by what you do with your cards rather than how much you have. As usual, if you have any questions, let me know. I know this is more of a cerebral kind of identity type discussion, but hopefully it does cultivate your goals in some way. In my opinion, understanding that identity and focusing on that will really help relieve a lot of stress and keep you focused, and understand that this is just a hobby at the end of the day. It's not life or death. So make sure when you do hear the certain hype or whatever card or whatever noise is going on, make sure that you can afford to jump on that. You make sure you can afford to buy that card, and just make sure you pace yourself and you stick to that core concept of being committed to the hobby and genuinely engaged. So as usual, till next time.